Hey there and welcome to this episode, and today I want to look at the pitch and the speed menu and the options that we have available to us. We've got a few samples loaded up. On bank A I have some drum sounds here. I'm going to choose a snare sound just to start off with. Once we have that selected, I'm going to open up my pitch and speed menu here. Now, if you change pad during this, it's fine. You don't need to keep reopening this window. It's going to just light up and tell you which one you're working on. So if I move to my kick drum, I can change my parameters for the kick drum or my snare drum. I'm just going to use the snare as an example. Now, there are a couple of things I'm not going to deep dive into because I've made separate episodes on those. The first one are these options in the bottom here where it says BPM set. So you can change the value, the kind of calculated value for your BPM, and you can change how the SP-404 kind of analyzes that value. I've made a separate video on that, so if you're interested in that, you check that one out. The other one here is pitch. So as we play around with the pitch of a sample, it's nice and handy, but what you'll notice is pitch and speed are connected in this vinyl mode. There are a couple of algorithms for doing time stretching, but I've made time stretching its own separate video, so if you're looking for that, you can skip on over to there. And that shows you the algorithms and how to kind of, separate these two, unlink them so that you can change your pitch and your speed, and it will start to time stretch your samples. So for today, we just want to look at the basic functions for pitch and speed. So the pitch there, as you can hear, pitching up and down. The other options we have in here are the basics. So you want to change the volume of a sample. Can do that in there. When we press shift here, we can change the panning of a sample. So we can pan it to the left, obviously to the right. If you hard pan completely to the right or hard pan completely to the left, you will notice it changes the sample to mono, which is nice and handy. But we can go back to like our central position here with C. The other thing that you can do, which is nice, and I'm just going to come out of this menu, but we can set our velocity per pad, which is cool. So if we come out of this and we do shift and 1, you'll notice we turn our fixed velocity on and off. And when we're not inside of the pitch and speed like window here, we are affecting all of the samples. So when this is currently set to off, now all of my samples across the board will have some velocity sensitivity, and I can play them with different volumes. When I turn it on here, now every sample, every pad here has a fixed velocity at like maximum velocity that we can play through. But what if we want to just make one pad fixed velocity? So I'm just going to make sure these are all off for a second. Go to pitch and speed. Let's take our snare drum again here. You can hear that it's got some velocity enabled. I'd have to hit it quite hard to get a loud volume. Same shortcut, shift and 1, and you will notice it says fixed now here. But if I go to my kick drum, it's still in, velocity mode where we've got some sensitivity. The snare drum is now fixed velocity, and that can be really useful because sometimes that's what I want to do. I want to come to my kick drum, do the same thing again here. I want my kick and my snare at fixed velocity and my hi-hat with some variation so that I can get some volume changes throughout. Now, I'm just going to undo those for a second just so that you can see it again. Just shift, the same shortcut to turn it on, turn it off. So those are the kind of basic functions that we have inside of the pitch and speed window here. The other thing that we can do, which I just want to show you before we sign off, is a little bit of like shortcut work to make your life easier. So if we exit out, make sure fixed velocity is on now because I've got some sample chops I'm going to play you. On my pad bank B here, I have my sample chops. And what I've done with those is I've put those into a mute group. Now, you don't need to understand mute groups just yet. I've done a video on that, but I want to demonstrate how this kind of works. So shift and pad 8, where we have our mute groups, I just want to show you that pads 2 to 6 are in a mute group. So they are essentially grouped together. They are kind of linked in a way. And if we exit out of this, what happens now, if we go to pitch and speed, and we have our sample chops here. If I start with, sample chop 2, I've got this going. I want to play around with the pitch. I want to change it, pitch it down a little bit. And I think actually that works really well with my beat. I want to do that to all of my samples. Of course, we can come into each pad and we can change the pitch, but it's going to get pretty tedious pretty quick. So if we go back here, let's just set this one back to 0 for a second. I can now change my pitch and my volume, some other parameters, by the bank, so everything within a bank, or by a mute group, and that's where mute groups are going to come in handy for you. And as I said, I've gone into those in another episode. But essentially, if we want to affect all of the samples here, so you'll notice that I didn't include sample 1 there. It was only samples 2 to 6 within a certain mute group. If I want to change just my sample chops that are in that mute group now, I make sure that one of the samples within that mute group is selected. I can press copy, and you will notice we'll get like a little message here that tells us that we are doing it to the mute group. We're going to hold it down, and the mute group is going to start flashing. Now when I change my pitch like this, and let's just pitch them all down, we have now pitched down every sample inside of this mute group. And because our first sample here was not included in the mute group, that is still set at 0. So again, I'm going to select something from the mute group first. Then I'm going to do copy here, hold it down, and I'm going to turn all of these samples back to 0 here. So everything across the board, including this first sample, is now set at 0 pitch. And then we can do our other shortcut. So let's say you want to affect an entire bank, all of your samples in a bank you want to change. We can use remain, so exactly the same way that we did it before. It's going to give us a slightly different message. It's going to tell us we're doing it to the bank, but we press and hold remain. And now when we pitch these, let's pitch these up just to change it up a little bit. We have now affected everything in that bank. So even the one that wasn't in the mute group, this first sample, has been pitched up by 7. The same as the sample chops. So some really, really handy shortcuts there. It's going to make your life a lot easier, make your workflow a lot speedier. Hope you've enjoyed it. Catch you guys in the next episode. Take care.